Welcome everyone, today it's Friday. Unfortunately for today our camera broke, so wait, crap, they weren't supposed to see that. As I said, the camera for today broke, however, we still have some generous giveaways to throw out to all of my dear viewers, talking about useful resources for the release of the next patch. So things like where do you get the results of the DPS, the results of the HPS, what about the new season's guide on what to do, etc, etc. How about min-maxing the renown of the next faction coming out, etc, etc. All of these things are now going to be given to you as a link down in the description as we go over through them one by one. The first one we go over is of course the most requested one, which is the one about the DPS logs in the PTR. The DPS log keeping track of the results in the PTR testing of the bosses ever since the first boss in Heroic over a month ago, and then every week more and more testing until we enter the first boss in Mythic, and then we continue down the line until the latest one of the testing of last weekend. So this is the one where you can find not just the results of the DPS and the averages, but also, if you're interested, the actual links down to the very same testing on Warcraft logs for you to check whatever you might want to check about each particular spec. Now, the same goes for the healer one, which is effectively just the same from the first boss in Heroic all the way down to the latest bosses when it comes to healers and their performances in the PTR. And this goes for raiding. Now, for Mythic Plus, we don't have anything nearly as detailed. We don't have nearly as many, spreadsheets detailing the performances in Mythic Plus. For Mythic Plus, you have to go a little bit more raw. One thing players might not know about, if you keep scrolling down Warcraft logs, you start with Aberus and Season 2 of Mythic Plus, but then you also find Vault of the Incarnates, and then you find Mythic Plus Season 1, and if you keep scrolling down, you will also find the new Raid and Mythic Plus Season 3. That's usually where you go if you want to find things about your spec in Mythic Plus. You just go here, you find an appropriate Mythic Plus keystone level, let's say plus 20, and then you look for a particular spec. Let's say you are full on overdosing on copium and you think Feral will be good, fine. Look for Feral specs. Of course, there is barely anybody playing Feral, but you can go and find the results of Mythic Plus logs in Mythic Plus that include a Feral with an interesting name. So that's what you can do for Mythic Plus. There is not going to be nearly as much of a decently nice and tidy spreadsheet. If you wanted to see the results of Mythic Plus, you have to go and find it out yourself from Warcraft logs. Now, another thing that can still be useful, it's not particularly about 10.2, but it can still provide some help, are the current sims. That can also be useful. In this Google Doc, you will be able to find the current season, current patch, current tuning simulations for single target. These are updated at the start of October. There hasn't been any tuning since this update, so these are quite relevant logs on how the specs are doing now. If you want to see, for example, how powerful a tier set in the next season is going to be and compare it with how in Season 2 we got the power of our tier sets, you can look here, for example. You can look at the difference in power from not having a tier set and having a 4-piece in Aberus, and how much you will be gaining in Amirdrasil in Season 3 instead. This can keep going, for example. You can check things like the power of Power Infusion, the power of Power Infusion on an opener with Bloodlust and all your cooldowns, as well as minor things like the bonus damage gain of Wind Fury. So even though this one right here is not strictly related to 10.2, it is still a good amount of info and data about the performance and the value of the specs right now. Talking about something that is purely about Season 3, it's the typical, the classic, the Raider's Guide for 10.2. Actually, it's kind of misleading. It's not really for Raiders. There is also plenty of players that might be interested in the info brought in this guide. Number one, you have the info on the upgrade system. To be fair, you're better off watching my video about the upgrade system. No bias in here whatsoever. What might be interesting for players is something that many players ask before the release of a patch with a new season, which is, what do I do at the release of the season? What should I focus? What is important? What do I need to make sure not to forget, not to do, for example? This is the answer. You get your nice, clean, week by week, what to do from week 1 all the way down to week 5, even going into the detail of which items and how many items you will be able to upgrade with your new crest system. It's gonna keep track week by week of how many crests you are spending and how many crests you are supposed to be spending for upgrades versus the ones for crafting, etc, etc. So if you are completely clueless about the new system, for example, this guide will already give you an idea on what you are supposed to be doing at the release of the next patch. There is also a few other extras in here that might be useful, talking about Season 3 and what to craft, as well as what's new in the raid in terms of loot, in terms of rare items, as well as, more importantly, the chart for reference of item level, for gear, for the different tracks of upgrades, which Mythic Plus keys drop which type of crest, etc, etc. So that's also going to be quite useful when it comes to strictly what comes out in 10.2. Another thing that comes out in 10.2 is going to be the new faction. The new faction with the new Renown levels and the new rewards. Now, typically this has not been really very important for players who want to be more competitive in the raid, in Mythic Plus, in PvP. We haven't really gotten much power tied behind a Renown faction. Instead, this new season with this new patch will give us the permanent augment rune, available once you reach Renown 18 with this new faction. So of course, with this one becoming quite important to reach, now we have obviously our guide on how to get to Renown 18 as fast as possible, straight from World of Modi, which is a very good guy making some pretty informative guides about many features in the game, including the one on how to get as much rep as possible. You have the written guide, of course, and then to not embarrass all of you, according to my research, 72% of you who cannot read, then you can watch the video instead. The TLDR of the entire thing will be to keep and save all of your tokens to then go to the Dream Surge event. The Dream Surge event has the option, the zone buff you can choose, which is the one that gives you 50% more rep, and at the moment that is working with the tokens you gain from the new faction. So you do all of the story, all of the side quests and everything that can give you a token, and then you go to the Dream Surge zone to use all of those tokens for a 50% extra buff in rep gained. And this is after having done all of this grinding on your alt, so that your alt will reach Renown 10, which will give the buff to your main, so your main will gain even more rep. That's another important thing for everyone who wants to go that one further step, everyone that wants to try hard a little bit more in the next patch and try to get the new permanent augment rune as fast as possible, which should be by the very end of the first week, or right after the reset into the second week is when you should be able to get to Renown 18 with this strategy and get your permanent augment rune. The last bit, I left the disappointment for last. Another thing that many players ask when a new patch comes out is, where are my DPS simulations? Where are the rankings of DPS for the patch? How do I know which spec is OP? Where are the sims? Where are the predictions, etc, etc? Basically, where is this? Where is this except not for live, but for the PTR? The answer is, there is no this. You're not gonna find any for now. You're not gonna be finding any compilations of simulations of multiple specs with their updated working sims for the PTR. Number one, because we have been getting quite a few changes every week, which have changed quite a few specs very often, and also because it requires players to do it manually. Players have to make, most of the times, their own API. API being their own code to feed the bot to replicate this rotation you want to use on a player. So you can go still on the Raidbots beta version, the Mimiron.raidbots site, to test the results of each spec on the PTR, but of course it's going to be much more unstable and much more volatile and unreliable compared to the real version, the live version. Still though, the best possible answer to this is to go to the class discords. Many of the class discords, of course, will have your same interest in finding out how their spec is performing, so you can go to any of the class discords and find out the sims, the PTR sims, and how the spec is doing. You will be able to find them very often, multiple players testing out their PTR power, maybe different builds, different setups, etc, to compare how their spec is doing in different builds. For example, you can even do other things yourself, like for example going into the search bar and searching it by yourself, by looking for raid bots and finding out the links of the Mimiron.raid bots, which are the PTR version, the testing version of the raid bot site, to see the results in the PTR of each spec. If you were looking at something very simple, like let me click this and let me be told exactly how each spec is doing right now, you can't really tell right now. The only way you can is, of course, by what we have been doing recently, which is checking the live results in the PTR, how players are performing, but not through a sim. At least for now, a compendium of everything all together for you to check. If one will come out anytime soon, you will be the first to know from myself. I will tell you immediately if it comes out, but for now there isn't any, and you have to manually look for it yourself. Besides that though, the rest were the more useful tools right now, even I myself have been using to keep up and check things out for the next season, in terms of knowledge, in terms of info. So hopefully by the end of this video, some of you might have wanted to bookmark some of these informational sites, spreadsheets or videos about the upcoming patch. So with this out of the way, I am now going to leave you to the rest of the supposed start of the weekend on this Friday. Thanks, of course, as usual, to all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and help the growth of the channel, as well as, of course, to everyone else who is still doing it completely for free. You can like and comment down below, as well as subscribe to the channel itself. With these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, I hate it. I hate it when I start a video and I realize I have no drinks nearby, so I have to go 30 minutes talking dry because I can't bother to stop for 10 seconds.